The cold winter wind cut through the Comanche camp like a sharp knife. Chief Thunderbear pulled his buffalo robe tighter around his shoulders as he watched his warriors return empty-handed from yet another hunting trip. The buffalo herds had moved far to the south, and the smaller game was becoming harder to find each day. But the chief's biggest worry wasn't the empty cooking pots or the thin faces of his people. His heart carried a much heavier burden. Every morning when he woke up, he thought about his son, Little Fox. The boy was 12 years old now, but he never joined the other children in their games or lessons. Little Fox had been born with a twisted leg that made walking difficult and running nearly impossible. While other boys his age were learning to ride horses and hunt with their fathers, Little Fox sat alone by the fire, watching from a distance. His dark eyes held a sadness that made the chief's chest feel tight with pain. A Comanche warrior must be strong and brave, the tribal elders often said, but how could Little Fox ever become a warrior when he could barely walk without limping? The other children didn't mean to be cruel, but they rarely included him in their activities. They would run off to play and Little Fox would be left behind trying to keep up on his weak leg. Thunderbear remembered the day Little Fox was born. The medicine woman had shaken her head sadly when she saw the baby's twisted limb. "This child will face many challenges," she had whispered. "But perhaps the Great Spirit has other plans for him." What plans could those be? The chief wondered this every single day. In their world, a man's worth was measured by his skill with horses, his ability to hunt, and his courage in battle. How could his son ever find his place among the Comanche people? The worst part was watching Little Fox become more and more bitter as the months passed. The boy who once smiled and laughed now barely spoke to anyone. He would sit by himself staring at the ground while his father's heart broke a little more each day. Sometimes Thunderbear caught his son looking at the other boys with such longing in his eyes that it took all the chief's strength not to cry. The recent raid on a white settlement had brought back much-needed supplies and horses, but it had also brought something unexpected. A white woman captive. She was young, maybe 25 winters, with light brown hair and eyes the color of summer sky. The warriors called her Blue Eyes, and they said she had been a teacher in the white settlement. Most captives either cried constantly or fought like wild animals. But this woman was different. She watched everything quietly, as if she was trying to understand their ways. She helped tend to wounded warriors without complaining and ate whatever food was given to her without making faces of disgust. The tribal women didn't trust her calm behavior. "She's planning something," they whispered to each other. "No white woman accepts captivity this easily. She must be plotting her escape." But Thunderbear noticed something different about Blue Eyes. When she looked at the stars at night, she seemed to know their patterns. When she walked through the camp, she paid attention to the plants and animals around her, just like the tribe's medicine woman did. There was intelligence in her eyes, the kind that came from learning and teaching others. Still, her fate would depend on how useful she proved to be during the harsh winter months ahead. If she caused trouble or tried to escape, she would face the same punishment as any other captive. But if she could help the tribe survive until spring, perhaps she might earn a different kind of future. Thunderbear pushed these thoughts aside as he watched his son sitting alone again, apart from the other children who were playing a game with leather balls. Little Fox's eyes followed their movements, but he made no attempt to join them. The chief's powerful hands clenched into fists. He had led his people through battles and harsh winters. He had made difficult decisions that saved lives and protected their way of life. But he felt completely helpless when it came to healing his son's wounded spirit. How could a great chief fail so completely at helping his own child find happiness? The weight of this failure pressed down on Thunderbear's shoulders heavier than any burden he had ever carried. As darkness fell over the camp, the chief made his way to his teepee. Where Little Fox was already lying on his sleeping furs turned away from the fire, Thunderbear wanted to say something, anything that might bring back the light to his son's eyes. But what words could fix what seemed impossible to heal? "Tomorrow will be better," he whispered, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. Little Fox didn't respond, and soon the chief heard the soft, steady breathing that meant his son had fallen asleep. Thunderbear stared into the dying flames of the fire, wondering if he would ever see his son truly smile again. Winter was long, and hope seemed as distant as the spring they all waited for. But sometimes, the most unexpected changes come from the most unlikely places. Blue Eyes had been with the Comanche tribe for 3 weeks now, and every day brought new challenges. Her real name was something the warriors couldn't pronounce properly, so they simply called her by the color of her eyes. She had been teaching children in a small frontier settlement when the raid happened. One moment she was showing her students how to write their letters, and the next moment she was being carried away on horseback into a completely different world. Unlike other captives she had heard about in stories, Blue Eyes didn't spend her days crying or trying to fight her way to freedom. She had always been practical even as a child. Tears wouldn't change her situation, and fighting would only make things worse. Instead, she watched and learned. Every morning, she observed how the Comanche women prepared food, how they cared for their children, and how they organized their daily tasks. She noticed which plants they gathered for medicine, and which ones they used for cooking. When the warriors returned with injuries, she watched the medicine woman treat their wounds with herbs and careful attention. The tribal women were suspicious of her calm behavior. "She's too quiet," said Dear Woman, one of the elder women who often glared at Blue Eyes with mistrust. "White captives usually scream and fight. This one is planning something bad." "Maybe she's a witch," whispered another woman. "My grandmother told stories of white women who could put curses on people." But Blue Eyes wasn't planning anything except survival. She had grown up on the frontier, where practical skills meant the difference between life and death. Her father had taught her to read the weather by watching cloud patterns and to identify safe plants from poisonous ones. Her mother had shown her how to tend wounds and make simple medicines from common herbs. These skills proved useful in the Comanche camp. When a warrior came back from hunting with a deep cut on his arm, Blue Eyes stepped forward and offered to help clean and bandage the wound. The medicine woman watched carefully as Blue Eyes worked, noting how gentle and thorough she was. "She has healing hands," the medicine woman told Chief Thunderbear later that day. "She knows things about plants and wounds that most white people don't know." Blue Eyes also surprised everyone by how quickly she began picking up words in the Comanche language. She listened carefully when people spoke, and practiced pronouncing new words when she was alone. Within 2 weeks, she could ask for water, food, and basic necessities. She could understand simple conversations and even make a few people laugh with her clumsy pronunciation. The children were the first to warm up to her. Unlike the adults, they weren't afraid of her or suspicious of her motives. They giggled when she mispronounced their names and patiently corrected her when she got words wrong. In return, she taught them a few words in English and showed them how to draw letters in the dirt with sticks. But one child always stayed away from these informal lessons. Little Fox, the chief's son, would watch from a distance but never come close enough to join in. Blue Eyes noticed how the other children didn't seem to include him in their games. She saw how he sat alone most of the time, his dark eyes filled with a sadness that reminded her of some of her former students who had struggled in school. One evening, as Blue Eyes helped the women prepare the evening meal, she overheard 2 warriors talking about Little Fox. "It's sad about the chief's son," one said. "A boy who can't run or ride properly will never become a true Comanche warrior." "The chief tries to hide his disappointment," the other replied. "But everyone knows the boy is a burden to the tribe. What use is a warrior who can't keep up?" Blue Eyes felt her heart ache for the young boy. She had taught many children over the years, including some who faced physical challenges. She knew that every child had special talents and abilities, even if they weren't obvious at first glance. But in this harsh environment where physical strength and speed were valued above all else, a child like Little Fox would struggle to find his place. That night, as she lay on her buffalo robes trying to fall asleep, Blue Eyes thought about the frontier school where she used to teach. She remembered Tommy, a student who couldn't see very well but had an amazing memory for stories and songs. She thought about little Lucy, who couldn't speak clearly but could solve mathematical problems faster than anyone else in class. Every child was special in their own way. The trick was helping them discover their hidden talents and finding ways for those talents to shine. Maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to help Little Fox discover what made him special too. As the wind howled around the teepee that night, Blue Eyes made a quiet promise to herself. She would find a way to reach the sad little boy who sat alone every day. She didn't know how yet, but her teacher's heart told her that Little Fox was hiding something wonderful inside himself. He just needed someone to help him find it. Chief Thunderbear felt worry growing in his chest like a cold stone. The sun was setting, painting the winter sky orange and pink, but his son Little Fox was nowhere to be found. The boy never missed the evening meal. It went against everything the Comanche people believed about family and respect. "When did you last see him?" Thunder Bear asked his wife, Running Stream. "This morning after the snow stopped," she replied, her own face showing concern. "He said he was going for a walk. You know how he likes to be alone sometimes." But this was different. Little Fox had been gone for hours and the temperature was dropping fast. The chief's mind filled with terrible possibilities. His son could have fallen through thin ice, gotten lost in the snow, or been attacked by hungry wolves. Thunder Bear gathered 3 of his best warriors and began searching the areas around camp where Little Fox sometimes went to think. They checked the creek bed, the rocky outcropping to the north, and the old buffalo wallow where the boy sometimes sat to watch the sunset. As they searched, Thunder Bear's worry turned to fear. His son's twisted leg made walking in deep snow difficult and dangerous. If Little Fox had fallen somewhere and couldn't get up, he might freeze to death before they found him. Then, just as the chief was about to expand the search to the dangerous areas farther from camp, he heard something that stopped him in his tracks. It was a sound he hadn't heard in so long that at first he didn't recognize it. Laughter. His son was laughing. Thunder Bear motioned for his warriors to stay back as he crept quietly toward the sound. Through the bare trees, he could see a small clearing where someone had built a fire. The orange glow flickered against the snow, and 2 figures sat beside it, completely absorbed in some kind of activity. What the chief saw when he got close enough to observe clearly took his breath away. His son Little Fox sat across from the white captive, Blue Eyes, and both of them were surrounded by an elaborate arrangement of objects in the snow. They had created what looked like an entire miniature world using stones, sticks, pieces of bark, and anything else they could find. But it was more than just a collection of objects. Blue Eyes was moving small stones around in patterns, clearly telling some kind of story. She would place a stone in one location, make flowing hand gestures, and then move other stones to new positions. Little Fox watched with complete attention, occasionally pointing to different stones and adding what sounded like suggestions or questions. Then it was Little Fox's turn. Thunder Bear watched in amazement as his son took control of the stone story, his face glowing with excitement and joy. The boy's hands moved confidently as he arranged and rearranged the objects, clearly weaving a complex tale that held Blue Eyes spellbound. The chief had never seen his son look like this. Little Fox's usual sadness and bitterness had completely disappeared, replaced by animation and enthusiasm that made him seem like a different child entirely. His eyes sparkled in the firelight, and his smile was so wide and genuine that Thunder Bear felt his own eyes fill with tears. As Thunder Bear continued watching, he began to understand what was happening. Blue Eyes had created a way for Little Fox to tell stories and share ideas that didn't require running, jumping, or any of the physical activities that usually left him behind. In this magical little world of stones and sticks, his son's mind could soar free from the limitations of his twisted leg. Little Fox was demonstrating creativity and intelligence that his father had never imagined existed. The boy was describing complex scenarios, creating detailed characters, and building storylines that seemed to flow naturally from his imagination. He wasn't just participating in the activity, he was excelling at it. Thunder Bear realized that all this time, while he had been grieving for the warrior son he thought he could never have, he had been blind to the remarkable child who actually existed. Little Fox didn't need to be fixed or healed. He needed to be seen and appreciated for who he already was. The white woman wasn't using any kind of magic or special medicine. She was simply treating Little Fox like his thoughts and ideas mattered. She listened to him with the same respect she might show a wise elder or skilled warrior. She had found a way to let his intelligence shine through activities that celebrated his mind, rather than his physical abilities. As the fire began to burn lower, Blue Eyes and Little Fox carefully packed away their stone people and story materials. They talked quietly together, planning what sounded like another storytelling session for the next day. The easy friendship between them was obvious, and Thunder Bear could see that his son had found something he had been missing his entire life, someone who saw his true worth. The chief waited until they had headed back toward camp before following at a distance. His mind was spinning with new thoughts and realizations. He had spent so much time focusing on what Little Fox couldn't do that he had never bothered to discover what the boy could do. More importantly, he was beginning to understand that Blue Eyes possessed a gift that might be even more valuable to the tribe then her knowledge of plants and healing. She had the ability to see potential where others saw only problems. She could find ways to help people discover their hidden strengths. That night, as Thunder Bear lay in his teepee listening to Little Fox's peaceful breathing, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, hope for his son's future. Maybe Little Fox would never become a traditional Comanche warrior, but perhaps he could become something even more valuable. Perhaps he could become a storyteller, a keeper of wisdom, or a teacher who could help other children discover their own special abilities. The chief fell asleep with a smile on his face, already planning how he might encourage this new friendship between his son and the remarkable white woman who had shown him that strength comes in many different forms. Over the next several days, Chief Thunder Bear found himself watching his son with completely new eyes. Every morning after the dawn meal, Little Fox would disappear to meet Blue Eyes at their special place near the cottonwood trees. And every evening he would return with his face glowing with happiness and excitement. The change in Little Fox was remarkable. The boy who had once sat silently by the fire now chattered enthusiastically about the things he had learned during the day. He talked about cloud patterns that could predict weather changes, about which plants could be used to make dyes for decorating clothes, and about the stories that different rock formations seemed to tell about ancient times. Blue Eyes showed me how to read the wind, Little Fox told his father one evening, his eyes bright with newfound knowledge. She says the way tree branches move can tell you if snow is coming, or if the weather will be warm tomorrow. Thunder Bear listened carefully, realizing that his son was learning skills that would be valuable to any Comanche, warrior or not. Weather prediction, plant knowledge, and the ability to read natural signs were all important survival skills in their world. But Blue Eyes wasn't just teaching Little Fox practical things. She was helping him develop his mind in ways that impressed the chief more each day. She had taught the boy to create detailed maps in the dirt, showing the locations of water sources, good hunting areas, and safe camping spots around their territory. "Look, Father," Little Fox said one day, drawing an accurate map of the area around their camp. "Blue Eyes taught me how to remember distances by counting my steps, and how to use the sun and stars to figure out directions, even when I can't see familiar landmarks." Thunder Bear studied his son's map and was amazed by its accuracy and detail. This kind of geographical knowledge was exactly the type of skill that made certain warriors valuable as scouts and guides. Little Fox might not be able to ride as fast as other boys, but his ability to remember and record information about the land could make him incredibly useful to war parties and hunting expeditions. The chief also noticed that other children were beginning to pay attention to Little Fox in a way they never had before. When Blue Eyes taught her outdoor lessons, she always included any children who wanted to learn. But Little Fox had become her special assistant, helping to explain concepts to the younger ones and demonstrating the techniques she taught. "Little Fox knows more about plant medicine than some of the adults," one of the tribal mothers told Thunder Bear. "Yesterday he helped my daughter identify which berries were safe to eat and which ones would make her sick." Even the tribal elders began to take notice. Gray Wolf, the oldest and wisest man in their band, stopped by Thunder Bear's teepee one evening with an interesting observation. "Your son has a gift for learning and remembering," the old man said. "Blue Eyes has found a way to help him use his mind like a warrior uses his bow and arrows. The boy stores knowledge the way we store arrows, carefully so they'll be ready when needed." Thunder Bear began to understand that Blue Eyes wasn't working magic on his son. She was simply doing what any good teacher does, finding ways to help her students' natural abilities shine. She had recognized that Little Fox was intelligent and curious, and she had created learning opportunities that played to his strengths rather than highlighting his weaknesses. More importantly, she was teaching Little Fox to see himself differently. Instead of focusing on what his twisted leg prevented him from doing, she helped him discover all the amazing things his mind could accomplish. She treated him like a valuable student whose ideas and observations mattered. The boy's confidence grew stronger each day. He began speaking up during tribal discussions, offering suggestions about weather patterns or sharing information about edible plants he had learned to identify. The adults listened to him respectfully, impressed by his knowledge and careful attention to detail. One morning, Thunder Bear followed his son and Blue Eyes to their usual meeting place, curious to see exactly how these learning sessions worked. What he observed taught him as much about leadership as it did about teaching. Blue Eyes never talked down to Little Fox or treated him like a child who needed to be protected. Instead, she asked for his opinions, listened carefully to his ideas, and built on his observations to help him learn even more. When Little Fox made a mistake, she gently corrected him without making him feel foolish. When he succeeded at something difficult, she celebrated his achievement like it was a great victory. This is how a true leader builds strength in others, Thunderbear thought to himself. Blue Eyes was showing him that real power came not from forcing people to follow, but from helping them discover their own abilities and confidence. The chief also realized that Blue Eyes was learning just as much as she was teaching. Little Fox was sharing tribal knowledge, Comanche words, and cultural traditions that helped her understand their way of life. It was a true partnership where both teacher and student benefited from their time together. As Thunderbear walked back to camp, he felt a deep sense of gratitude toward the white woman who had given him back his son's happiness. But more than that, he was beginning to understand that Blue Eyes possessed a gift that could benefit their entire tribe. She had the rare ability to see potential in people that even they didn't know existed, and to find ways to help that potential grow into something valuable. That evening, as he watched Little Fox confidently explaining star patterns to a group of younger children, Thunderbear made a decision. Whatever happened with the other tribal leaders, whatever they decided about Blue Eyes' fate, he would not let this remarkable woman be traded away like a simple captive. She had given his son a future, and perhaps she could help other members of their tribe discover hidden strengths as well. The tribal council meeting took place on a cold February morning when the wind howled so loudly around the teepees that the men had to raise their voices to be heard. Chief Thunderbear sat in the circle with the other leaders, but his mind kept wandering to his son, who was probably out in the woods with Blue Eyes, learning something new and wonderful despite the harsh weather. "We need to talk about the white woman," said Black Hawk, one of the senior warriors who always spoke his mind bluntly. "Winter is almost over and we haven't decided what to do with her. The Mexican traders will be coming through again soon. They'll pay good money for a healthy captive like her." Several of the men nodded in agreement. The winter had been harder than usual, and the tribe's stores of food and supplies were running low. The goods they could get by trading Blue Eyes would help them survive until spring brought better hunting and gathering opportunities. "She's been useful," admitted Grey Wolf, the eldest member of the council. "She knows about healing and plants, but keeping a white captive is dangerous. The soldiers at the fort might come looking for her. We can't risk bringing trouble to our families." Thunderbear felt his chest tighten with anxiety. He had been dreading this conversation, knowing it would come eventually. How could he explain to these practical men that Blue Eyes was worth more to the tribe than whatever goods the Mexican traders might offer? How could he make them understand what she had done for Little Fox without sounding like a soft-hearted father who couldn't think clearly? "She's teaching our children valuable skills," Thunderbear said carefully. "My son has learned more about reading weather and identifying plants in the past month than most boys learn in years. She has knowledge that could benefit all of us." Black Hawk shook his head dismissively. "Your son is special circumstances," he said, trying to be polite about Little Fox's disability. "But the rest of our children need to learn warrior skills, not white man's tricks. We can't let one captive change our ways just because she's been kind to a boy who can't hunt." The words stung, even though Thunderbear knew Black Hawk didn't mean to be cruel. But they also revealed something important. The other leaders still saw Little Fox as nothing more than a burden, someone who needed special consideration because of his twisted leg. "What about the horses we could get for her?" asked another warrior. 3 good horses, maybe 4, plus blankets and metal tools. That's worth more than teaching children to draw pictures in the dirt." The discussion continued for over an hour, with most of the men favoring the practical choice of trading Blue Eyes for supplies. Thunderbear argued as best he could, but he could see that he was fighting a losing battle. The other leaders respected him, but they also had families to think about and tough decisions to make. Finally, Grey Wolf suggested a compromise. "Let's wait until the traders actually arrive," he said. "We can decide then, based on what they're offering and what our needs are at that time. It's only a few weeks away." Thunderbear agreed to the delay, but his heart was heavy as he left the council meeting. He knew that when the time came, the other leaders would choose the immediate benefits of trade goods over the long-term value of Blue Eyes' teaching abilities. But the real test came sooner than anyone expected. 3 days later, a group of Kiowa warriors approached their camp under a flag of truce. They brought news that changed everything. A large cavalry patrol from the nearest fort was searching the area, looking for missing settlers and asking questions about white captives. They're offering a big reward for information about a white woman teacher who disappeared during a raid, the Kiowa messenger explained. The soldiers say she's important to the government people. They want her back alive. The tribal council called an emergency meeting that same evening. Now the situation was much more serious than simply deciding whether to trade Blue Eyes for goods. If the cavalry found her in their camp, it could mean war. We have to get rid of her, Blackhawk said firmly. Send her away tonight before the soldiers get closer. Let her find her own way back to her people. But Grey Wolf shook his head. If we just abandon her in the wilderness, she'll die. The soldiers will blame us anyway when they find her body. That won't solve our problem. As the men argued about the best way to handle this dangerous situation, Thunderbear found himself thinking about Blue Eyes herself. During all this discussion about her fate, no one had asked what she wanted to do. No one had considered that she might have her own thoughts about staying or leaving. Later that night, after the council meeting ended without reaching a decision, Thunderbear made his way to Blue Eyes' teepee. He found her sitting by a small fire, working on what looked like a detailed drawing of medicinal plants. You heard about the soldiers? He asked in the broken English he had been learning from her. She nodded calmly. I heard. The other women were talking about it. You want to go back? To your people? Blue Eyes was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful and sad. I don't know if they're still my people, she said. The settlement where I taught, it's probably gone now. Most of the families there are dead or scattered. I have no husband, no children, no family waiting for me. She looked up at Thunderbear with those clear blue eyes that had given her name. But I do have something here. I have Little Fox and the other children I've been teaching. I have work that matters, a purpose that makes me feel useful. Thunderbear felt a mixture of hope and worry. Staying is dangerous now. For you and for us, I know, she said quietly. But running away would mean abandoning Little Fox just when he's beginning to believe in himself. It would mean leaving behind all the children who are learning to love knowledge and discovery. As Thunderbear walked back to his own teepee that night, he realized that Blue Eyes faced the same difficult choice the tribal council was struggling with. She could choose the safe path, trying to return to the white world, where she belonged, or she could choose the dangerous path of staying with people who had become like family to her. The test of loyalty worked both ways. The tribe had to decide if Blue Eyes was worth the risk of keeping her. And she had to decide if they were worth the risk of staying. The blizzard struck 3 days later with a fury that caught everyone by surprise. The wind howled like angry spirits and snow fell so thick that a person couldn't see more than a few feet in any direction. The temperature dropped so fast that water turned to ice almost instantly, and even the strongest warriors stayed inside their warm teepees, waiting for the storm to pass. But Little Fox had other plans. The boy had been listening to the adults talking about Blue Eyes and the soldiers who were looking for her. He heard the worry in his father's voice and saw the fear in the other tribal members' eyes. Even though he was only 12 years old, Little Fox understood that his friend might be taken away from him, and the thought filled him with a desperate need to prove something important. I have to show them that I'm not useless, he whispered to himself as he bundled up in his warmest clothes. If I can do something brave, something that helps the tribe, maybe they'll listen to Father about keeping Blue Eyes. Little Fox had heard the men talking about a hidden cave system about 2 miles north of camp, where the tribe sometimes stored emergency supplies. If he could reach the caves and bring back some of the stored food during this terrible storm, it would prove that he could contribute to the tribe's survival despite his twisted leg. He slipped out of his teepee while his parents were sleeping, wrapping himself in every warm piece of clothing he could find. The storm hit him like a wall of ice and wind the moment he stepped outside. But Little Fox gritted his teeth and started walking north, using a long stick to help him navigate through the deep snow. What Little Fox didn't understand was just how dangerous his plan really was. The blizzard was worse than any storm the tribe had seen in years, and even experienced warriors wouldn't attempt to travel in such conditions. His twisted leg, which made walking difficult on good days, became a serious liability in the deep snow and howling wind. Within half an hour, Little Fox was completely lost. The familiar landmarks he usually used to find his way had disappeared in the swirling white chaos. His feet were numb with cold, and his twisted leg ached terribly from struggling through snow that was sometimes up to his waist. Panic began to set in as he realized he had no idea which direction led back to camp. The wind was so loud he couldn't hear anything else, and the snow was falling so hard he couldn't see the sun to figure out directions. Worse yet, he was getting tired, and he knew that sitting down to rest in this cold might mean never getting up again. Back at camp, Thunder Bear woke to find his son missing. The discovery filled him with a terror worse than any he had ever felt in battle. Little Fox's twisted leg made travel in normal conditions difficult. In a blizzard like this, it could be a death sentence. "When did you last see him?" Thunder Bear asked his wife, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. "Last night before we went to sleep," Running Stream replied, her face pale with fear. "He was talking about wanting to help the tribe, about proving that he wasn't a burden. I thought it was just talk." Thunder Bear quickly gathered his best warriors, but even they hesitated to go out in the storm. "Chief, we can barely see our own hands in front of our faces," said one of the men. "How can we search for tracks when the snow is covering everything?" That's when Blue Eyes stepped forward. "I'll help you find him," she said firmly, already wrapping herself in warm clothes and gathering supplies. "You can't come with us," Thunder Bear protested. "You're not trained for this kind of weather. You'll only slow us down or get lost yourself." But Blue Eyes was already tying snowshoes to her feet, something she had learned to make during her weeks with the tribe. "I know how Little Fox thinks," she said. "I know the places he likes to go when he wants to be alone or prove something. You need someone who understands his mind, not just someone who can track his footprints." The search party that ventured into the blizzard was small. Thunder Bear, 2 experienced warriors, and Blue Eyes. The men were skeptical about bringing a white woman on such a dangerous mission, but they respected their chief's judgment, and they were desperate enough to try anything. Blue Eyes proved her worth almost immediately. While the warriors looked for obvious signs like broken branches or disturbed snow, she thought like a teacher trying to understand a student's behavior. She guided them toward the places Little Fox had shown her during their lessons. The high ridge where he liked to watch for eagles. The old lightning-struck tree where he often sat to think. He would go north, she explained as they struggled through the storm. He mentioned the storage cave several times. He thinks if he could bring back supplies during the storm, everyone would see him as brave and useful. For 3 hours they searched, calling Little Fox's name into the wind and hoping for an answer. The cold was brutal, and even the experienced warriors were beginning to suffer from the extreme conditions. Thunder Bear's heart grew heavier with each passing moment, as he imagined his son frozen somewhere in the endless white wilderness. Then Blue Eyes spotted something that the others had missed, a faint impression in the snow near a cluster of rocks. It wasn't much of a track, just a slight depression that might have been made by someone walking with an uneven gait. "There," she pointed. "He was here maybe an hour ago." He was heading toward those trees. Following Blue Eyes' guidance, they found Little Fox huddled behind a fallen log, barely conscious from cold and exhaustion. His lips were blue, his hands were frozen, and he was shivering so violently he could barely speak, but he was alive. Thunder Bear scooped up his son while Blue Eyes quickly examined him for signs of serious frostbite. Her frontier upbringing had taught her how to recognize and treat cold injuries, and she worked efficiently to warm Little Fox's frozen hands and feet, while the warriors built a quick shelter from the wind. "We need to get him back to camp immediately," Blue Eyes said. "He's in danger of losing some toes if we don't warm him up properly." The journey back to camp was exhausting and dangerous, with the men taking turns carrying Little Fox while Blue Eyes monitored his condition. When they finally reached the safety of the tribal teepees, Blue Eyes took charge of his medical care, using techniques her mother had taught her for treating severe cold exposure. She worked through the night, carefully warming Little Fox's frozen extremities, monitoring his breathing and making sure he stayed conscious. By morning, when the blizzard finally began to subside, it was clear that her quick thinking and medical knowledge had saved his life. As Little Fox recovered over the next few days, the story of Blue Eyes' role in his rescue spread throughout the camp. The tribal members who had been suspicious of her motives saw how she had risked her own life to help find the chief's son. They saw how she had provided the crucial knowledge and skills that made his rescue possible. More importantly, they saw that her loyalty to Little Fox and to their tribe was real and deep. She had proven that she wasn't just a captive waiting for a chance to escape. She was someone who would risk everything to protect the people she cared about. Spring arrived early that year, bringing warm sunshine and the sweet sound of melting snow dripping from the teepee covers. The long winter was finally over, and with it came a time for new beginnings and important decisions. Chief Thunder Bear had spent many sleepless nights thinking about what had happened during the blizzard, and what it meant for his son, for Blue Eyes, and for his tribe's future. Little Fox had recovered completely from his dangerous adventure in the storm, but the experience had changed him in ways that surprised everyone. Instead of being discouraged by his near disaster, he seemed to have gained a new kind of confidence. He had attempted something brave and difficult, and even though he had gotten lost and needed rescue, he had shown courage that impressed the tribal elders. "The boy has the heart of a warrior, even if his leg is weak," Grey Wolf told Thunder Bear one morning. "He was willing to risk everything to help his people. That kind of spirit is more valuable than strong muscles." More importantly, the other children had begun to see Little Fox differently. His dramatic rescue had made him something of a hero among the younger tribal members, and they now listened with respect when he shared the knowledge Blue Eyes had taught him. "Little Fox knows which plants can stop bleeding," one of the mothers told her husband. "Yesterday he helped treat my nephew's cut when he fell from his horse. The boy knows almost as much about healing as our medicine woman." The tribal council meeting that would decide Blue Eyes' fate was scheduled for the day after the spring equinox ceremony. Thunder Bear knew this would be the most important decision he had ever had to influence as chief. The Mexican traders had already sent word that they would arrive within the month, ready to trade horses and goods for captives. But something had changed in the way people talked about Blue Eyes. The women no longer whispered suspiciously about her motives. The warriors no longer saw her as just another captive to be bartered away. Her actions during the blizzard had proven her loyalty beyond any doubt. "She could have run away while we were all focused on finding Little Fox," Black Hawk admitted. "The storm would have covered her tracks and we might never have found her. Instead, she risked her life to help save the boy." The night before the council meeting, Thunder Bear walked to the place where Blue Eyes and Little Fox often held their learning sessions. He found them there as expected, but now they were surrounded by 6 other children who hung on every word as Blue Eyes explained how to identify edible plants. "This one is called wild onion," she was saying, holding up a plant she had drawn in the dirt. "It grows near water and you can eat the whole thing, but be careful not to confuse it with death commas, which look similar but will make you very sick." Little Fox added his own knowledge to the lesson. "Death commas has a different smell," he explained to the younger children. "And the leaves are thicker. My teacher Blue Eyes showed me how to test plants safely, by tasting just a tiny bit first." Watching this scene, Thunder Bear realized that Blue Eyes had become much more than a captive or even a friend to his son. She had become a true teacher to the entire younger generation, sharing knowledge that would help them survive and thrive in their harsh world. After the children dispersed to return to their families, Thunder Bear approached Blue Eyes with a proposal he had been thinking about for weeks. "Tomorrow the council will decide your fate," he said in the careful English he had learned from her. "The traders want to buy you, but I want to offer you something different." Blue Eyes looked at him with those clear eyes that had given her name, waiting patiently for him to continue. "I want to offer you a choice," Thunder Bear said. "You can ask us to help you return to your people, and we will do our best to get you safely back to the white settlements. No one will think badly of you for wanting to go home." He paused, gathering his thoughts for the most important words he had ever spoken in English. "Or you can choose to stay with us as a member of our tribe, not as a captive but as a teacher and healer. Someone who helps our children learn and grow strong in their minds, not just their bodies." Blue Eyes was quiet for a long moment, watching Little Fox as he carefully packed away the teaching materials they had used for the day's lesson. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but certain. "I've been thinking about this choice for weeks," she said. "I know the tribal council is meeting tomorrow, and I know what it means for everyone." She looked directly at Thunder Bear, her expression serious but peaceful. "My old life is gone. The settlement where I taught was destroyed, and most of the people I knew there are dead. I have no family waiting for me in the white world." Then she smiled, and her whole face lit up with warmth and happiness. "But here I have Little Fox, who has become like a son to me. I have other children who are eager to learn. I have work that matters and people who need what I can offer. The next morning, Thunderbear stood before the tribal council with more confidence than he had felt in years. When the time came to discuss Blue Eye's fate, he spoke with the authority of a chief who had finally learned to see strength in all its forms. Blue Eyes has proven her loyalty to our people, he announced. She has shown that her knowledge and teaching ability are more valuable than any goods the traders could offer us. I propose that we offer her a permanent place among us. To his surprise, the discussion that followed was shorter than he had expected. One by one, the tribal leaders shared stories of how Blue Eyes had helped their families, treating injuries, teaching children, sharing knowledge about plants and weather that had practical value for everyone. She saved your son's life, Grey Wolf pointed out. But more than that, she gave him back his pride and purpose. That's worth more than all the horses in Mexico. When the final vote was taken, it was unanimous. Blue Eyes would be offered the choice to become a full member of the tribe, with all the rights and protections that came with that status. That evening, as the sun set over their camp, Thunderbear found himself sitting by the fire with his son and Blue Eyes, listening to Little Fox tell stories to a group of fascinated children. The boy's voice was strong and confident. His imagination soared as he wove tales of brave warriors and wise animals. Thunderbear watched his son's animated face and realized that his greatest fear had been transformed into his greatest pride. Little Fox would never be a traditional Comanche warrior, but he had become something just as valuable, a keeper of knowledge, a teacher, and a bridge between different ways of understanding the world. The chief's eyes filled with grateful tears as he listened to his son laugh with pure joy. The sound that had once seemed lost forever was now a daily gift, as natural and welcome as the sunrise. Blue Eyes had indeed possessed a special power, but it wasn't magic or medicine. It was simply the ability to see the best in people and help them see it in themselves. She had looked at a sad, disabled boy and seen a brilliant teacher waiting to emerge. She had looked at a harsh, unfamiliar culture and found ways to contribute and belong. Most importantly, she had taught a worried father that strength comes in many forms, and that every person has something valuable to offer if someone cares enough to help them find it. As the stars appeared in the darkening sky, Thunderbear smiled and added his own laughter to his son's, finally understanding that the most powerful gift anyone can give is the simple act of believing in someone else's potential.